Hello friends. Pokemon Diamond and Pearl receive a lot of criticism in a few areas. There's the fact that the game has basically no enemy AI, so that most of your opponents select moves totally randomly. There's the regional Pokédex, which doesn't actually include a bunch of new Pokemon, despite these being the games to introduce those Pokemon. And then there's the gyms and the Pokemon League. This is the one I often hear jokes about, since when it pops up, it's really stark. For those who haven't played Diamond and Pearl, the gyms and Pokemon League are the same as those that preceded them. Type-themed dungeons and boss battles that the player defeats in order to progress through the game, culminating with the battles against the Elite Four and the Champion. In most games, the gym leaders and the Elite Four fairly strictly use the types that they are themed for. Blaine only uses fire types in red and blue, Whitney only uses normal types in crystal, and so on and so forth. But people often like to joke about the fact that gym leaders and the Elite Four in Diamond and Pearl do not adhere to this convention, instead favouring the use of moves of that type instead. This was a new take on the gym leaders after a few games of the same thing, and the devs decidedly got creative about how these fights would play out. And who's to say this is a bad idea? There are some advantages and disadvantages to this strategy. It may make the battles less predictable, as it's not always clear what kinds of fire moves a normal type Pokemon might have access to. It could make the fights more challenging for players doing mono-type playthroughs, where they would previously be able to rely on super effective moves to sweep a team, but now need to use a different strategy to account for the differently typed Pokemon. Of course, it could also make it easier by depriving the opponent of the same type attack bonus for most attacks. There are some merits and drawbacks to this idea, and I certainly don't want to rag on the devs for trying something new, but the jokes kept nagging at me. How divergent are the Pokemon used by gym leaders and their trainers really? Do the gym leaders actually use so few Pokemon of their type theme? I had to know. The numbers, what do they actually tell us beyond laughing at Ronald McDonald for using a ghost flying type Pokemon? Today, I'm going to analyse the gyms in Elite Four in Diamond and Pearl based on how closely they adhere to their type theme, and then compare it to both Platinum and Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. First up is Rourke. To be fair, when people talk about the gym leaders being terrible, they never really talk about the early gyms, since the range of Pokemon they have available is very limited. You've accessed maybe 4 or 5 routes tops by the time you get to Oriba City. There's only so many Pokemon you can encounter in that time. Rourke is the example of this. He has 3 Pokemon, all of which are rock types, and 2 of which are Geodude and Onix, staples of all rock type gyms. The bigger controversy here is that they gave him a level 14 Cranidos, which is actually murderous. It has 125 attack and headbutt, and it hits like a truck. If you picked Chimchar, good luck beating this one without evolving first. But anyway, 100% adherence to the type theme of rock. Gardenia is the same. As I said earlier, the early gyms don't have the strongest variety of Pokemon to choose from given their low levels and limited map coverage, so their potential for egregious departures from type theming is also low. I suppose it would be possible that Gardenia and Rourke could be out here using Dragon and Ice types, but that's just not typically how Pokemon thinks about what Pokemon trainers should use. Gardenia has a Cherubi, a Turtwig, and a Roserade. She's certainly not a pushover with the Roserade, and if you picked Piplup, you could definitely be in trouble here if you don't have a Staravia or something else to deal with it. But again, 100% type adherence. Maylene, the fighting type gym leader of Veilstone City. Sinnoh's regional dex relies a lot on classic Pokemon from Generation 1 to fill out the numbers, and Maylene's gym is an example of that. Of the 9 Pokemon that the gym trainers have in this gym, 7 of them are from the Machop line and 6 of them are Machokes. Maylene herself has a Meditite, a Machoke, and a Lucario. The type combinations are less standard, with Meditite's Psychic Fighting and Lucario's Fighting Steel, but all of the Pokemon here are at least part Fighting type. Crasher Wake. Aside from his outlandish personality and over-the-top appearance, he has a fairly standard Water-type team. He has a Gyarados, the perennial strong Water-type Pokemon, a Quagsire, and a Floatzel. Nothing about this fight is particularly notable, to be honest. He has water types, he's not super hard, and you can't rely solely on electric or grass attacks because of the Quagsire and the Gyarados. Also, the gym trainers all have water Pokemon with the exception of one trainer using an Azurill. I don't really think that this is all that terrible, to be honest, since it's weird that Azurill is a normal type anyway, and it should definitely just be a water type. So the gym is 93.3% water type. Hearthome City's Fantina is a bit better in my opinion for being both quite difficult and using mostly new Pokemon. Obviously in a Pokedex of 150 Pokemon you can only have so many new of each type, but Fantina manages to use both Drifloon and Mismagius, alongside the classic Gengar, 100% type adherence. Their movesets are not as annoying as they could be, with the only status move here being Confuse Ray, rather than the possible Will-O-Wisp and Hypnosis. Byron's Gym, Canalav City. This is the beginning of the decline. The majority of the Pokemon used by gym trainers are Onix, which is rock ground. Sure, it evolves into a steel type, but it is definitely not one now, and it's not like there aren't other steel types available that they could have given these trainers. A few Onixes would be okay, but there's 7 of them in 7 fights, including one fight where the guy just has 3 Onixes and nothing else. Also, there's a couple of ace trainers in this gym. One of them has a Steelix and a Skorupi. Skorupi is a bug poison type, poison being basically the opposite of steel, so that's a bit outrageous. The other ace trainer has an Azumarill, which is also not steel type. Byron himself has 100% steel types with a Bronzor, a Steelix, and a Bastiodon, so there's no issues there, but his gym trainers are slipping. Overall, the gym is 40% adherent to the steel type theme, which is abysmal. We get to Snowpoint City and the decline is sustained. The gym trainers here have a variety of types that are not ice type, including but not limited to a Steelix, wrong gym guy, a Pelipper, a Golduck, a Tentacruel, a Floatzel, and a Quagsire. Now look, Pokemon are often water-ice type, especially in the early games, but there's just no excuse for having a Steelix in an ice-type gym, especially when we just came from the Steel-type gym. Candace herself is not as bad, but she does have a Medicham, which is also not close to an ice-type. Sure, it has Ice Punch, in line with the idea of gyms using moves, not types, but the rest of her team also only has one Ice-type move as well, so I'm not super convinced by that. 50% of the gym Pokemon are Ice types, which is a bit better than Byron, but still not great. Final gym is Volkner's in Sunyshore City. This is the one that people rag on a lot, and with good reason. Not because of the kid in the Pikachu costume who has 4 Pikachus, though that is funny, but because of the Pokemon here who are not electric types. It's much the same as Snowpoint. There's a Kadabra, a Mr. Mime, a Bibarel, a Steelix, and a Medicham. I'm not sure what it is about gym ace trainers and using Steelixes in gyms that are not steel type except for the steel gym, but they all do. Now, Volkner. He is the worst of the gym leaders for not adhering to his type. His team is only 50% electric types as he uses an Ambipom and an Octillery. Again, they both use one electric type move, but he is a gym leader. He should be using a higher proportion of moves or electric types. The gym in total is 61.1% electric type. Again, slightly better than the last, but definitely not good. Now we come to the Elite Four, which includes the worst example of the non-type adherence in the whole game, but we'll come to that. The Elite Four as a whole is not too bad. Aaron starts out, and while Drapion is actually Poison Dark type, I'm inclined to give him a pass since it does at least evolve from a bug type in Skorupi. So 80% actual bug types, but all come from bug families. Bertha is second up. Again, 80% ground types, as she has a Sudowoodo, which knows Earthquake, but certainly isn't ground type. I'm less inclined to give her a pass on that, since she easily could have had an actual ground type, such as Gastrodon or Torterra, or dare I even say it, Steelix. So fine, sure Bertha, but do better. Now we come to Flint. Ronald McDonald himself. This is the granddaddy of all mockery in terms of type adherence in Diamond and Pearl. The man named Flint, the Fire-type Elite 4 user whose room is literally full of flames and red in the background, has 2 fire types. 2 of the 5 total Pokemon. Frankly, it's embarrassing. And it makes me wonder if the devs did the characters first, got to the end of the Elite Four, and realized they'd actually forgotten to add any fire types to the regional decks. Technically speaking, Flint has all of the fire types that are available. Rapidash and Infernape are quite literally the only fire families in the whole Pokedex for Diamond and Pearl prior to the post-game. If I'm being really critical, I could say that they could have given Flint 2 Rapidashes or 2 Infernapes, as they have with previous Elite Four members who have multiples of some Pokemon, but I think that would distract from the real problem, the total lack of fire types in the Pokedex. So it's 40% type adherence. The last member of the Elite Four, Lucian, is the only purist here and has 100% psychic types. I'd expect nothing less from a distinguished man such as himself, who is clearly constantly reading books. He gets it. He has 5 psychic types, all distinct and of mixed types mostly. Lucian conducts himself with grace and style and should be recognized for understanding the assignment and then executing it with dignity. Cynthia uses a mixed team by design, so I'm just going to breeze right past that. So, those are the gyms and Elite Four of Diamond and Pearl. What's their overall score? Oribir, Eterna, and Veilstone are all 100% type adherent. Good job, those gyms. Pastoria's gym has 15 Pokemon, of which 14 are water types, meaning they come out to 93.3% water type adherent, because of that one sneaky Azurill, which is a water type. Hearthome City has 100% ghost types. Canalav City Gym has 15 Pokemon, 6 of which are steel types, meaning it has the lowest percentage of Pokemon adhering to the type theme with 40%. Snowpoint Gym is not much better, they have 14 Pokemon, 7 of which are ice types, making it 50% adherent. Sunnyshore Gym is a bit better, but has the worst leader at 50%, and overall has 18 Pokemon, 11 of which are electric types, making it 61.1% type theme adherent. The Elite Four are mostly fine and better at the assignment with the exception of Flint, who fails on most metrics at 40%. Aaron and Bertha are both 80% and Lucian is 100% because he's the best. There are some things I would note about this data as we see it. Firstly, the lack of Pokemon encountered in the early game and the general level curve means that early gym trainers and leaders adhere much more closely to their type themes than later gyms and leaders, as we see a decline over time as more Pokemon become available. Secondly, though Mocked is the worst of the bunch, Volkner's gym is not the worst one when you factor in the gym trainers. Byron's gym is. If you're looking at gym leaders specifically, then Volkner is the worst, but fails to hold a candle to Flint, who is the worst of them on an individual basis with only 40% type adherence. To address Flint specifically, I also think he fails in the aspect of using fire moves instead of fire types, as his Pokemon in total also have 40% of their moves being fire type, which I consider to be very low. So, did they get any better at using Pokemon in their type theme in Platinum? The answer is a resounding yes. They abandoned the idea in its entirety and reverted to simple gym trainers and leaders use Pokemon of that type. Rourke, Gardenia, and Maylene all maintain their 100% type adherence, and Maylene's gym even has a Heracross and a Croagunk now, which is better than 6 Machoke's. Pastoria's gym has more Pokemon, but still one Azurill amongst the water types, so it's now 93.7%, a whopping 0.4% improvement. As I said earlier, the stranger thing about this is that Azurill is a normal type at all, so I kinda give that a pass. Hearthome Gym is still 100%, which is great. Canalav was the beginning of the decline in Diamond and Pearl. Can it bring it back for Platinum? The answer is a resounding yes. Canalav Gym now features 100% steel types, which is a massive 60% improvement. Good job, Byron. Snowpoint was previously the lowest scoring gym. How did it change here? Like with Byron, massive improvement. There are no Medichams to be found and only ice types around. Great work, Candace. Lastly, Volkner, the Diamond and Pearl gym leader they love to roast the most. In Platinum, he defies the haters by attaining a pure electric type team, and so do his gym trainers. 100% for Volkner, and great job for having cool Pokemon too. Flint was the most egregious offender last time, and we want to know, can he redeem himself? We'll get to that. There is a break in the trend, as Aaron does have some new Pokemon, but he keeps his Drapion, which is again Dark Poison, not Bug. And again, I give him a pass for this one, since Drapion does evolve from a Bug type, and it can still be said that he has Pokemon with 100% Bug families. Bertha swaps out a couple of Pokemon here and there and now has 100% ground types, which is great to see. We now come to Flint, the worst of the worst last time. 40% fire types, 40% fire type moves, just no real claim or justification for his aesthetic and room design whatsoever. In Platinum, it feels like they added Houndoom just to make sure Flint has more to use. He's now won a 100% with a Houndoom, a Flareon, and a Magmortar joining his team. Lucian, as he was then, he is now. 100% psychic types. We love to see it. No further comment required on Lucian's impeccable everything. The severity of the change between these games makes it clear to me that it was a very deliberate choice to change the Pokemon back to adhering to type themes, but raises a different question altogether. Why didn't they just do it right in the first place? Like, you playtested it, you knew that you only put 2 fire-type Pokemon families in Diamond and Pearl, went, yeah, that's fine, and then corrected severely 2 years later. Maybe they really liked the idea of Pokemon using different types of moves instead of just being those types, but got too much blowback, or maybe it just didn't work out like they'd hoped. I'll never know for sure, but if you have some obscure internet resource I couldn't find that sheds light on this, please let me know in the comments. One criticism I do have for Platinum is that the Elite Four do not update their teams for the rematches, despite most gym leaders doing so and now having a full 486 Pokemon to choose from. It's like they did it for the gym leaders and then they forgot to do it for the Elite Four as well. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but I like seeing what teams the bosses would have if they weren't hampered by regional Pokedex restrictions. On to Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, the most bitterly disappointing remakes to date. Keeping in line with the disappointment, they did the faithful remake thing and reverted the teams to the original Diamond and Pearl so that later gym leaders minimally utilize Pokemon of their type. It's definitely more faithful to the originals, but in my view, I want my remakes to add to the originals and give me a bit more rather than the literal reskinning we got with these. To sum up, I still don't think that giving effect to type themes by making them have those moves is a bad idea. I just think it was badly executed in Diamond and Pearl. It seems like part of the reason for the move type emphasis was that they just didn't add enough fire types for Flint to use, which is not a good reason in my view. I also, generally speaking, don't like the decision in Diamond and Pearl to lock away some of the new Pokemon behind the national decks. It just does not make the game better to play, especially for a series where the motto is gotta catch 'em all. Pokemon is more fun when you have more opportunities to use a lot of different Pokemon, and barring Pokemon from use up until post-game just limits the enjoyment. I will say a quick word in defense of Diamond and Pearl's gyms and Elite Four, and that's that not strictly adhering to your type theme is not unique to Diamond and Pearl. Notably, all members of the Kanto Elite Four except Agatha have Pokemon not of their type. Bruno has 2 Onyxes for some reason. Lorelei consistently uses Slowbro, and in most cases, it doesn't even know Ice Beam or Blizzard. The Hoenn League was the only one to hard stick to its type themes. So maybe we're all being a little harsh on Diamond and Pearl and should spread out our criticism a little more evenly. Except for Flint, there's no justifying Flint. Maybe they'll give this another whirl sometime, who can say. That's all I have for you folks, thank you for watching and see you next time.